Hey, teacher friends. In recent videos, I've been sharing what I have stopped doing in order to be more effective when it comes to classroom management. Well, in today's video, I am flipping the script and I'm going to share things that I started doing to be more effective in my classroom management. Coming up next. Hey, teacher friends, Michelle Holliday here. I am a behavior strategist and I help teachers, schools, districts, and youth organizations manage their classrooms and their learning environments with less stress and less struggle. And in today's video, I'm talking about things that I started doing in order to be effective when it comes to classroom management. Now, the journey of being effective when it comes to classroom management has its ups and downs. So there's things that you're going to have to stop doing, but guess what? There are things you will have to start doing to be effective, and that's what today's video is all about. So let's get started. The first thing I started doing was teaching what I wanted to see regardless of the grade level. So often teachers think that once students reach a certain age or grade level that they already know how to behave or navigate their behavior in a classroom setting. That could be further from the truth. I actually learned this lesson teaching middle school. As I began to cultivate positive relationships with some of my students, I still noticed that they demonstrated certain misbehaviors in my classroom, and I really couldn't figure out why. It wasn't until I began to teach them replacement behaviors and how they could respond to me, respond to their peers, how to even pay attention and focus, that I realized they really didn't have the skills necessary to be successful in their classroom. As I began to implement this practice in various classrooms, I really started to see a shift in my classroom environment and the behaviors, and it saved me a lot of time and effort. The second thing I started to do is that I came up with replacement behaviors that were realistic and relevant. So, what do I mean by realistic? These are replacement behaviors that will really work in a real classroom environment. For example, a lot of times we teach our students, if a student is bothering you, tell the teacher. Depending on the grade level and depending on what's actually happening in the situation, sometimes going to the teacher can do more harm than good. So I had to start thinking differently. So for me, I start to say, okay, if I were a student in this situation, what are some words, what are some go-to phrases, or what are some behaviors that I could do that would save face, but also not get me in trouble in the classroom? And those were some of the replacement behaviors I taught my students. So when I talked about being relevant, really what I took into consideration was what is relevant to today's society? What will work in today's society, but yet and still be respectful and appropriate? So that also shifted what I taught my students to do when it came to replacement behaviors. As I adjusted those two things, my students were more willing to try out and practice these replacement behaviors in the classroom, making it just a better environment overall. The third thing I started to do is take a really good look at my classroom. So I took a look at the patterns of behaviors that were happening. What was happening at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day? When would misbehaviors start to happen in my classroom? And when were misbehaviors never really an issue? As I began to look at these patterns, it gave me insight and direction on when to use certain strategies for a better outcome in my classroom. Taking the time to really look at my classroom also was a big time and effort saver. The fourth thing I started to do is make behavior change a priority in my classroom. And listen, if you ask any of my former students, they will tell you I'm all about academics and learning. However, if your students are not listening to you, if they're not following directions, if they're calling out and out of seat, how can they learn? And so I made teaching replacement behaviors, teaching appropriate social skills a priority in my classroom because I learned that when my students behave better, sky's the limit when it comes to teaching. And the fifth thing I did is I began to strategically communicate to my administration. Now, listen, I hear a lot of teachers saying, my principal won't let me do this, admin won't let me do that. I get it. I went through the same thing. However, I decided to approach my administration differently. I started going to them with two main things, data and solutions. The data showed that if I spent more time teaching replacement behaviors, doing more reinforcement activities, that I would naturally get more teaching time rather than struggling with the behaviors and sending my students out of class. Also, when I went to my administration, I came up with strategies and solutions that I thought would be appropriate. Did they approve them all? No, but they did approve some of them, and some of them they even let me take a little risk with trying some new things. So the lesson I learned was to make my administration a part of the solution when it came to classroom challenges that I was facing. So there you have it, 5 things that I started doing in my classroom to make management more effective. Let me just tell you, it made a huge difference in multiple classrooms that I taught over the years. So what are some things that you have started doing to make your classroom management more effective? Share it in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.